Hello, welcome, Karen.
Thanks,
Once
Matt.
again, is the Chief Marketing Officer at for the Mount Sinai uh, hospitals and hospital group and network.
Mhm.
So it's wonderful to have you here. It's been wonderful to host you at some other events that we've done, and I'd love to, again, I know you also, like Emily, you have a little sort of presentation, right? We've been working through some brands that are international in our early cases to cover FX, which is still kind of pretty well known as a smaller brand. Now we're moving on. I know, have some international participants here. Our Columbia students are probably familiar with Mount Sinai if they weren't before from being, in New York and connected. But
Mhm.
why don't you kick things off, talk a little bit about yourself, Karen, and then, set up, give your sense of, these values of the future of marketing leadership, your insights there, and go through a bit of your presentation to do that.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. So if we could bring up the slides, that would be terrific. Perfect. So again, thank you to the ANA and to Columbia Business School for the opportunity to be here. I am VP and Chief Marketing Officer for the Mount Sinai Health System in New York. And I was previously to that, I was Chief Marketing Officer at Lighthouse Guild, an organization that supports people living with vision loss. And prior to that, I led many of the marketing efforts at New York Presbyterian. I am also a really proud alum of Columbia Business School, so delighted to be here with all the students and look forward to future conversations with you. Given today's really tumultuous environment that is driven so much by the pandemic and also really important social issues, I'm going to discuss the importance of team agility. And that concept came up in earlier conversations today as experienced by the Mount Sinai Health System. So next slide, please. I'm going to start with a little bit about us. Many of you in New York know us, but for others on the call, next slide. So we are among the largest health systems in New York, and here are some of the numbers. Of special note, we are a hospital that actually gave birth to a medical school that is now ranked top 20 in the United States and also hosts the largest residency program in the country. This is different from many of the established medical schools that are out there who have direct affiliations with well-known universities. So I thought I would point out that interesting fact. Next slide. In talking about the future of marketing, team agility is really what I will lean a lot into today. And the crisis that we are enduring and that we at Mount Sinai Health System endured is foundational to this conversation. Since March 7th, when we saw our first COVID patient, we've seen over 10,000 COVID patients, and we discharged over 8,000 of them. The numbers are very, very large. And at its peak in April, almost all of our hospital beds were filled with COVID patients. This really, as you guys can all imagine, dramatically impacted our organization and our marketing and communications team's workflow practically overnight. What happened is we shifted our focus from normal marketing activities to really providing up-to-date, real-time information to our patients and staff and the communities that we serve. Our ambulatory practices closed, and our initiatives had to refocus and center around providing telemedicine and virtual care options. When the COVID-19 epicenter shifted away from New York, we reopened elective surgery, and we had to focus on the message about bringing patients back to the health system. We were delivering information about what to do to keep patients safe because there was tremendous fear about coming back into the hospital system. And so thinking about our team and how we were agile, I think what we did in this crisis that was successful is we smashed silos, and we really learned quickly not to sweat the small stuff. We worked as a team to discuss and rapidly overcome obstacles and we set up processes to make things happen quickly. And I think really importantly, we let our leaders lead, and that's incredibly important in a crisis. Next slide. So the leader of our command center, Don Boyce, at one point asked a really profound question, and he brought all of us together. And again, of course, marketing and comms was part of a large emergency command team effort. And he said to the group, when in your professional life will you all be working at the same time on the same issue with the same purpose? And it was just a moment in time that was just such a realization for me, because that really was the case. And it was also a realization of the strength that we had as a collective team. Next slide. So imagine the communication needs. During this period, there were waves of intensity that required constant and agile communication and marketing support. We were preparing for the surge. One patient would leave, another patient would come in. Public spaces were converted to temporary patient pods. We set up a field hospital in Central Park. I think it was in 2 days that we did that. Emergency rooms in our system were dealing with over 50% more capacity when so many of our healthcare teams were getting sick and not able to come to work. And at the same time, we had employees and our amazing students at the medical school volunteering to help out and fill the different roles across the health system. By mid-March, I'm sure y'all read about it in the news, we were navigating challenges with personal protective equipment. And at the same time, all of this was going on, our incredible clinicians and scientists at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai were combining their expertise to understand the disease, make discoveries, and improve outcomes. So it was a really, really intense period. And next slide, please. So breaking it down to support all of these fast-flowing communication needs coming from so many directions, we did a few things that really can be summarized in 3 buckets: define, align, and design. Next slide. So working with our emergency command center leadership and the cross-functional teams, which so many of the previous speakers talked about as being so important, we defined our marketing and communication team's role in the crisis, and we quickly determined how we would rally around what needed to be done. And I'll give some examples of that in a few minutes. But really what we did was we created this integrated effort around the different tools of marketing that we have, around the paid tools, the owned tools, the earned tools, the shared capabilities, all of these coming together to rally around the needs. Next slide. And we had to align around the organization to support those information needs. And so this really wasn't just about our marketing and comms team. Besides the organizational constituents that I spoke about, it was also about our partners. And we really value the strength of our partners, and specifically our advertising agency, our digital agency. They came in right with us. They were right lockstep with us, side by side. And it wasn't only that, right? We had signage needs, we had translation needs, we had marketing research needs, on and on and on. And I really have to say that our partners rose to the occasion at rapid speeds right alongside us and supported our efforts. And we as a team, as a collective team, were vigilant about what we needed, from whom we needed it, how we needed it, why we needed it, and the best way to get it to the people who needed that information. Next slide. And our organization design had to be nimble and interconnected. And so that's really summed up in the word agility, which you heard mentioned earlier today. Incredibly, incredibly important. Next slide. So here are some examples as the crisis unfolded. In the early days of March and April, it was all about information. Internal communications under the leadership of Alan Flippen was intense. Policies were changing by the hour, and we were doing our best to keep up. Next slide. And as the COVID crisis swept through New York City, our healthcare workers were experiencing extraordinary stress and intensity. You all might remember the 7 p.m. clap It was known throughout the world, I think, actually. And we joined, as a communications team, we joined the New Yorkers and people around the United States and the world in thanking and appreciating our healthcare workers for the efforts that they were putting forth. Next slide. And during the height of the crisis, we stopped elective surgeries and fear flooded the news. People were literally making life and death decisions about their health needs. They were choosing to stay at home rather than come in for the care that they needed. So and we were not alone in this. Other hospitals around New York City, the Greater New York Hospital Association, others were instrumental in putting together information about combating that fear and supporting safety. And when I talk about supporting safety, it wasn't just like, oh, we're safe. People needed to see exactly what we were doing to promote safety in detail. And we leveraged a lot of our marketing and communication tools to do that. So we wanted to share this information, and we did with the physicians and the patients so that people would come back for care, which they have. Next slide. So these are some of the digital examples under the leadership of John Davey and his team that supported the messages around safety. And one public-facing initiative that you can see here in magenta is our podcast series, Road to Resilience. And I really encourage all of you to check out that podcast series. It's not just featuring Mount Sinai. It's really leaning into the importance of resilience, and we all need that today, right? And it's tremendous examples about how to be resilient during this crisis, as well as in other aspects of life. And this is one piece of a much larger effort that was also just referenced earlier. I think it might have been Fernanda who spoke about the importance of mental health and wellness. And Mount Sinai recognized that among the staff, among the employees. And so we really have a very comprehensive way to approach mental health and wellness and support the people that are in our health system. And it is a toolkit, I will mention, available to anyone who is on this call or anyone who wants it. You can contact me, and we're happy to give you what we have as a guidepost. Next slide. And then the reopening. So all of this is happening within, a 3.5 month period. The financial impact of this crisis is tremendous. And so marketing efforts, not to mention the patient needs, the marketing efforts were focused on supporting reopening. We want people not to put their health on hold. And right now, what we're really speaking about is don't put your screenings on hold. So if you need the mammogram, if you need the prostate screening, whatever you need, don't put your health on hold, because we are here, we collectively as a health system are here to support you in a very safe way. And we want people to get the care that they need. Next slide, please. So the Black Lives Matter movement, sparked by the murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, intensified our health system's activities to address diversity and racism. And so this was another element of what our marketing and communications team was doing, which is really to support communication needs around this. And this is obviously an ongoing commitment. Mount Sinai has a lot of many programs and efforts to support diversity and anti-racism. Next slide. So we broke silos, right? We became an integrated unit. Next slide. And obviously, just like Emily spoke about, KPIs, measuring success of our efforts is incredibly important. And in the next couple of pages, I'll just give you illustrative examples, because everything that we were doing, we're measuring, because we know that we are accountable to the goals, to the business goals of the organization. So it's incredibly important, as Emily spoke about, to understand the finances and what we as a marketing and communications team were working to support. So for example, this is a slide that shows an aggregated impact of our digital efforts, measuring the impact of our digital campaigns on finding a doctor via online visits. Thanks, next slide. Requesting an appointment, either online or through calls. Next slide, please. Campaign content during this crisis was consumed and engaged at extraordinary rates. And the ultimate goal, really, from a business imperative and a patient perspective is to bring those patients back. So we had over 16 million website visits, which was a significant increase in our world, in our efforts over the previous period. Next slide, please. We were leading the way in branded search, people searching literally for Mount Sinai, and this engagement represents growth from the previous year. Next slide. And in our category, we achieved #1 ranking in the nation in total engagement under the leadership of Chloe Politis in social media platforms. And social media was another way for us to really promote messages around telehealth, safety, and not putting our health on hold. Next slide, please. So under the outstanding leadership of Lucia Lee from our press team, we had significant national coverage that allowed us to achieve a top position, #1 position among the top 100 media outlets in the United States. And I think this 1-minute video will just give you a glimpse into much of what was happening, and it shows how our team, the things that our team was working on collaboratively to communicate. So if you could play the video now.
New York's Mount Sinai Hospital.
The Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai Hospital is on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic.
We've really turned our hospital upside down in order to create capacity to accept these COVID-positive patients.
You're fighting an enemy, so it is like a war. And we have teams of very brave people fighting that war every day in and day out.
The workers are there, 16-hour shifts, sometimes longer.
New York State began antibody testing today, is hoping to conduct as many as 14,000 per week.
People who develop neutralizing antibody responses are going to be protected from reinfection.
And we've now launched a new center for resilience, for stress, and for personal growth.
People are reporting 70 to 80% reductions in their perceived level of stress.
Thank you for all you're doing and all your personnel are doing. It's extraordinary, and we all need you, so thank you.
And just the last slide, I really want to say thank you again to the ANA and to Columbia Business School for the opportunity to be here, but it's also just a chance for me publicly to thank my Mount Sinai team members for their leadership, partnership, and collaboration. So thank you.
Great, Karen, thank you. So gosh, a lot packed in there. One of I see there's even a couple of questions that are sort of immediate follow-ups rather than anything I might jump to, which I think are great, or tied into my own thinking. One of them that came up and I think got there in this last video is this sort of burnout effect that's going on for the entire world right now. As a health system, you guys are facing that likely more than almost anyone else on the planet. Where have you worked as a marketing, internal comms team, et cetera? How are you balancing, where are you creating that sort of permission or the ability for your employees to feel connected with the brand, better connected to themselves, to be able to do their work as best as possible in extraordinarily trying times for them?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts around that, and I'll start inward and work outward. So our own team meets regularly. We meet in daily huddles, and we're very clear to openly share thoughts and concerns during the crisis and even currently about the stresses that we're feeling, and we do a lot to acknowledge that. Mount Sinai has set up a center that is actually dedicated to resilience and the idea of leaning into mental health and wellness, so that we have made it very clear that we will take care of our employees. This was from very early on in the crisis. So not only are we studying the effects of the stress and the challenges, but we're providing resources in a very, very accessible way to everyone. I personally participate whenever I can in the Calm workshops that we make available. We have trained practitioners regularly presenting meditation, ways to think about how to manage stress. So it's very much part of the culture of Mount Sinai, and it's part of recognizing the fact that this is very real and also providing solutions to address it.
Great. I think it's so interesting how we've talked about internal needs and the internal importance of sort of brand connection, communication, and this year, like so many things, has advanced stuff that has been discussed for a while in rapid ways, and this is one of them. Another thing I'm interested in, right, particularly in your space, as a marketer, it's a very interesting tension. Mostly it's like growth, right? More customers are buying our product more, becoming more loyal, exactly. And I think there's elements of reputation for a hospital where that returning customer is core. But there's also this interesting business versus health tension, right? In some ways you want less customers because they're healthy, and that's the goal of medicine. So just talk a little bit about that, the challenges and insights or things you face on balancing the unique sort of place that healthcare has in, quote unquote, growth versus health.
Sure. And I would say, one of the starting points is that the research that we had during this crisis showed that healthcare systems, physicians, really were the most trusted source of information, right, during this period. So the idea that someone might choose to stay home and deal with a lethal disease and not come in for care as a result of the fear that they were feeling, that's just unacceptable, right, in the world of healthcare. So we were doing everything in our power to make healthcare accessible, and that speaks to the idea of virtual visits as a starting point, and also the safety that I spoke about. So while we hope that everyone is healthy and doesn't need our services, the reality is that they very much do. And Mount Sinai is known for its tertiary and quaternary care, which are very complex care cases. So we really did everything in our power, and we will continue to do so, to be a resource for people. In addition, recognizing that everyone doesn't have such a complicated disease, we ramped up in lightning speed our telehealth services, making those options available too. So there's this idea of we are responsible as an organization to provide healthcare. That is our mission, that is our purpose, high quality healthcare, regardless of someone's ability to pay. So that is what we will do as an institution. And we do balance that with the idea of saying, wow, to keep our doors open, we need to get the patients, the complex patients, in for care. We need to support the growth, but really the imperative is to get people the healthcare that they need in the best possible way.
And how was that in the, telemedicine, other developments that went on, that the role of marketing at Mount Sinai in sort of the patient, outside of the world, we call it user experience or customer experience, right? What is that? What is the role of marketing in your institution in that patient experience?
Yeah, so we are supporting the patient experience, right? Because it's the direct link between operations and communications. So during this crisis, to use as an example, it was all about the acceleration and the rollout of virtual health services. So that became incredibly important because patients needed to meet with physicians without having sessions take place in person, because the offices, the hospital had many COVID patients at that time. So we went from single digit virtual visits to over, I think it was about 2,500 per week, dramatic increases. And the point about patient experience, and we're still perfecting that now, is that going from the bricks and mortar patient experience to the virtual patient experience has to be just as strong. But what's interesting about this, Matt, is that with all the advances in technology and the use of virtual and the use of AI and the use of other capabilities, we really realize that the human to human interaction is still so very important, because the research was telling us that phone calls were still incredibly important for patients to have that fear alleviated. They wanted to hear from their doctors. So you've got the technology, but you still need that human to human touch. And I think one other point I'll make about technology is on the scientific end of things, right? So marketing, as you heard in the short video clip, is supporting the advancements. So we're supporting the fact that our clinicians and scientists are using artificial intelligence to look at relevant drug and treatment testing, to support vaccine design and testing, to support population health management. So we have our researchers using this incredible AI and all these sophisticated technologies to really advance healthcare. Marketing is supporting the communication of that so the public is aware, so they know what we're doing as healthcare leaders and really advancing the science of medicine.
Great. I definitely want to make sure that we get into a little bit of that, future marketing leadership for our students who are on this call and part of the overall conference today. So, do you have your specific tips? What's helped? What should they learn? Where is their value? What should they be thinking of? What do you look for in talent management and the skill sets and expectations you have as a CMO?
Absolutely. So first of all, welcome to all the Columbia students. It's great to have you here. I would say, much like the answers of some of the previous speakers, it really is a right brain, left brain exercise, right? So I think in today's world, the idea of being savvy in finance is incredibly important because marketing supports business strategy. And if you don't understand the business strategy, you can't really be an effective marketer. So it's as simple as that on one level. I think data and analytics is also another really important skill to have. And when I say that, everybody talks about data, right? So if you're coming to our marketing team, what we're really looking for is someone who not only, you have a whole data lake or whatever we want to call it, right? But it's someone who can basically say, what is the validity of, first of all, let me step back. What is the question we're trying to answer? What is it that we need? What is it that we need data for? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And then, okay, here's the data we have. Is the data valid? What assumptions are being made in the data? Then it's what are the implications from that, right? So I'm giving the students here an example of the analytics, the critical thinking that's really needed to be useful. Because once you have the implications, you're going to draw conclusions, but then what are the actions? So it's not just about data, it's about how we use data, how we understand data. So students, I think, need to have that critical thinking capability. On the other part of the brain, I think it's really important to hone in on leadership skills and communication skills, writing skills, because at the end of the day, we are this integrated team. We need to have the emotional intelligence to be able to work with others who might not speak the marketing language. We need to be able to understand, and we need to be able to assimilate a lot of information and have that agility to do so. So happy to discuss this more with any of the students out there.
Great. And yes, I hope to have you back for a more shorter, in-depth discussion with some students with specific interest. Another area, right, you brought it up in the opening on diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera. I know we hosted an event on, can pharma find reputation redemption earlier this fall with the head of communications from J&J and Pfizer. And one of the issues that came up, they brought up and talked to was often there's a distrust among underrepresented minorities, particularly African Americans, due to some historic things, even going back to the Tuskegee syphilis work between health providers and themselves. And I wondered whether you are seeing that, have insights. Is that a role you're playing? As I know also, right, in the testing and all that, there's a recognition of the healthcare community that we maybe not have done as good a job at thinking about the various different types of people and the uniqueness they may have as we look at patient care and treatments and all those kind of things?
So Mount Sinai has a tremendous commitment to diversity and inclusion, and I really would encourage everyone to visit our website and see the many activities that we are doing to support systematic change. And so within our own marketing team, which, what's interesting, one of the things that our Office of Diversity and Inclusion actually leads is a Chats for Change, where employees participate in the idea of addressing various aspects of this very important topic and what we can do to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas around that is, what is within 3 feet of your control? What can you touch? What can you actually do to make a difference? So we as a marketing communications team are self-reflecting on that, right? And so we are in 2021, we are expanding our marketing and communications team to have more. We are a United Nations when we really break it down, but to further expand that diversity and inclusion representation on our team. We are looking at the marketing communications that we are putting out into the market and saying, are we truly addressing the communities that really need to hear what we have to say? And are we helping them, or are we just doing the minimal? So we are being very self-reflective along with the entire institution to address this very, very important issue. But it really does, it begs the question of what can you control to make a difference within 3 feet of your control?
Yeah, I think that's right. There's often that stress we have about the big things going on in society and a lack of ability to affect them, and trying to bring the circle down to something close, I think is really important. I think that can also be important in a leadership setting as well, of that controlling the close proximity in addition to thinking about the circles beyond. So I think that's really a great expanded point beyond just this specific issue. I'll leave with one last, give you an opportunity for one last thought, which is, what makes you optimistic about, the future of marketing leadership?
Well, I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of marketing leadership because I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. And the reason that I say that, Matt, is because of the people that are in my world professionally and personally. So from a professional perspective, I am so beyond incredibly fortunate to work with such a talented team. And I've now firsthand witnessed the idea of people putting forth all their energy, their grit, the relentless drive to just make a difference. And that's the marketing communications team, as well as the clinicians, the scientists, the nurses, the healthcare workers, and everyone that I've really had the privilege, the operations, the strategy, the privilege to work with. And when you drive all in that same direction, change is going to happen. Change is going to happen. And so we will get there. I'm very optimistic. And for the students who are on this call, students at the Icahn School of Medicine, they fed right into that. They all joined in. So you as future marketing leaders will be part of that energy, and you will help bring us forward through the pandemic, which is still going on, beyond the pandemic, and we are really in this together. So I'm very optimistic.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Once again, virtual round of applause from everyone in the audience today. And thank you. And of course, we look forward to bringing you back to the business school and to other events that we run at the Brand Center.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here. Thank you.